All right, let's get started. Happy last session. Welcome to the MASQUE session at IETF 122. This session is being recorded. By this point in the week, you likely know how to enter the queue, but this is a great time to remember for the last time to sign into MeetEcho. There's a bunch of you that are already in here. There's a few more of you in the room. So be good to make sure that you show up in there. You'll need that to get into the queue. Excellent use of little QR code signs. This is the IETF note well. These are the terms under which we participate in the IETF. Please make sure that you've read it, understand it, speak up if you have any questions. Take extra care to note the details around timely disclosure of any IPR that may be applicable that you're aware of. We also operate under a code of conduct, so please be kind and respectful to each other. And if there are any concerns, you can contact the chairs, the responsible AD, or the Ombuds team. These are some helpful links for you to click on in the PDF later when you don't want to go find where everything is. Has things like the agenda and the notes and everything else. It also has our list of chairs. We have Martin Seaman joining us for the first time. After this meeting, Dennis and Martin will continue and I will no longer be with you, which is to say I'll be sitting over there instead. This is our agenda for today. We've got 4 adopted documents that we're going to try to see how much we can push over the finish line. This is the last session, so let's go, go, go. And then we've got one thing in as time permits, where David's going to present a document interestingly titled the MASQUE proxy. There's been some good discussion on the list on this one already, so it should be good to chat about it a bit in person. With that, Abby, you're up first. All right, you can present from your phone, or I also have a clicker for you if you want to use the clicker. You can use your phone or the clicker, whichever works. Phone it is.
Hi everyone, my name is Abhi Singh and I'll be presenting MASQUE ConnectDB bind today. So as you know, ConnectDB with bind support, you can receive traffic from multiple targets. And here are the changes we made. You can see the asterisks in the path, ConnectDB, the ConnectDB bind header, and then in the response, the proxy confirms that that it supports ConnectDB UDP bind, and it returns the proxy public address. And yeah, a few IETFs ago, we added compression assign, and we're able to omit IPN port information by sending a capsule that uses one particular context for a given IP port tuple, and compression close to close that context. And also, if we do compression assign with version 0, it means receive from any address. And so changes since last time, not much has changed. There were some editorial improvements, the first one being the IANA considerations. And the second one, I will talk a little bit more about it, which is while I was refining the implementation and found some space to remove some vagueness in the spec of the draft. So to remove some ambiguity, we were able to add some of this information in the spec. So we consider the reuse of a context ID for another tuple to be malformed. So if the client, one of the peer or the server try to do a compression assign on the same context ID, when that one already exists for another tuple, it's considered malformed. There is the allocation of a new context ID when when there's one that already exists for the same tuple is also considered malformed. When both client and proxy try to do a compression assign at the same time for the same tuple, we kind of prioritize the client and close that of the proxy, and this is to prevent any conflict. And also, we've already specified in the draft that only the client is able to do uncompressed contexts and not the proxy. But here's we're defining that if the client receives it anyway, receives a request for an uncompressed context, that is also considered malformed. Yeah, these are just some clarifications to make the implementation a bit simpler. And implementations, as far as I know, it's still only we have done the implementation. I'm not sure what the status is on other implementations in the room. I think we had some discussion about it last IETF. Yeah, so our implementation, at least the server implementation, is already available in Google Quiche. So if you click that link in the slides, you should be able to find it. And yeah, I would love to encourage other people to also do some implementations, so we can do some interop and move this draft forward. And that's about it. Thank you.
Are there any other people who have either implemented or are planning and or interested in implementing? I see hands, at least 2 hands. Very nice.
Yeah. So,
And Christian's in the queue.
go ahead, Christian.
Actually, I'm midway through implementing it.
Awesome.
Midway through, love it.
Yeah, whenever you're done, we can. I can perhaps get in touch with you so we can do a little bit of an interop pre next IETF.
Yeah, I should be done before the next IETF.
Awesome. Thank you.
That would be lovely. I think one of the options that we have is, since I think it sounds like things are pretty well wrapped up, we could potentially run a working group last call on this now, sure, and then essentially hold it until we get enough of that. Multiple people have tried it and actually achieved interop.
Yep.
Sounds good? I see thumbs up in the room as well. Very nice. We look forward to hearing the report at the next one about how the hackathon went.
Sorry.
At the next IETF, let's chat about how the hackathon went. Sounds really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we will send a last call out to the list. That also means somewhat implicitly that this is a great time to actually read the document if you haven't read it recently. So give it a scroll through, send comments to the list or on GitHub. And thank you, Abhi, and have a safe flight. Okay, next up we have QUIC aware proxying in HTTP. Would you like a clicker? Great, sweet. Let us enable that.
Hello, I'm Eric Rosenberg. I work at Apple, and I'm going to give a brief update on QUIC aware proxying. So quick recap on what QUIC aware proxying is. In Connect UDP, if we're proxying QUIC, there are a few things that we can take advantage of at the proxy when we start to share the QUIC connection IDs with the proxy. One of those things is port sharing, so that proxies can conserve how many ports they're using. And then the other thing that's defined in this draft is a forwarded mode, where clients are able to send packets destined for a particular target directly to a proxy, allowing them to avoid the extra encapsulation, encryption, and MTU overhead. There are a few updates since the last revision. I'll go through each of them. The first update is there was an issue filed about disabling forwarding mode. If a client or a proxy no longer wanted to use forwarding mode in the middle of a proxied connection, should there be any way for them to signal that they don't want to do that anymore? Unfortunately, you can't just close the connection ID registration because that would also stop you from being able to use the port sharing. So the way how we've kind of addressed this now is saying that if a client wants to stop using forwarding mode, they should just create a new Connect UDP request, and they're welcome to migrate the client to target connection from their old tunnel to the new one. The next issue that was addressed was about port sharing. One of the concerns that was brought up was there may be some target servers that don't behave well when there are multiple QUIC connections coming from the same client port. And if we have the target facing ports on the proxy being reused, this might cause some issues. So in this latest revision, we added the proxy QUIC port sharing header to make this explicitly opt-in behavior. So if you're a client that does not want your traffic to be coming from the same port as a bunch of other people's connections, you just wouldn't send this header, or you'd send it with value of false. And if you don't have any concerns there, you should send it with the value of true so that proxies can use this optimization. And then the last issue that was addressed in this revision, oh, I see someone's in the queue.
One question for the previous slide with no heads. Was there any evidence for servers misbehaving? Because this is pretty standard QUIC behavior, and if a server fails that, then it probably should be fixed.
I'm not sure if any empirical evidence was provided. I think the concern that was raised was servers like denial of service heuristics. If you're a client on a mobile device, you probably have a lot fewer connections than a large proxy that's handling many connections might have. So no, I don't think there's any specific evidence other than theoretical, server kind of denial of service heuristics.
Lucas?
Let Martin Duke go in front of me, sorry.
Thank you, Lucas. Martin Duke, Google. I think one reason you might not want this is if you were using SCONE, since that's a 4-tuple driven process, you might not want to share your stuff with other people.
Lucas part 2? Oh, never mind. No more Lucas.
Just briefly to Martin Duke's point, SCONE is completely optional and the endpoints opt into using it. This is an endpoint. Or if as an endpoint you choose to go through a proxy, don't use SCONE. It doesn't really make sense.
What if the proxy wants to throttle?
How are we supposed to capture that last noise in the notes? Good.
Well, the transcription said,
Yeah, see, just like that.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Just so the port sharing is an optional feature that you don't have to use. And so for a lot of these things, there are some combinations that don't make sense. And there's an easy solution of, doctor, it hurts when I poke myself in the eye.
Okay, so I mean, to be clear, I'm not ripping this. I think someone asked, does this actually matter? And I'm saying it does matter because you may not want port sharing because of SCONE. I'm not saying we shouldn't have this. I'm arguing in favor of this option.
We're in violent agreement then. My apologies.
Okay.
All right. So the last issue was about registration ordering. So especially when you're using the port sharing part of this draft, the client connection ID needs to be registered with the proxy before the proxy receives any packets from the target. Otherwise, when the proxy receives that packet, it's not going to know which client that packet is associated with. So we added some text to clarify this, but one of the things that seems like we didn't have much text on was what about the first flight? Ideally, clients should be able to send their Connect UDP along with the registration capsule and their first flight of packets without having to wait for the acknowledgement of the registration to come back. So what do we do about this? Pretty much what I just said. Client sends the registration capsule along with its first flight of packets if it wishes. And the proxy should buffer some reasonable number of packets while it waits for that register client connection ID. And then in the event that that failed, maybe the proxy doesn't want it to be registered because there's a conflict or for any other reason, we regress to kind of the slow case of the client now has to wait for a successful registration before it sends its next QUIC initial with the new connection IDs. And at the proxy, it will just discard any packets that might have been in flight until a successful registration has been made and that ACK it acknowledging the registration has been sent to the client. All right, and those were the updates. So if there are any other questions, happy to take them. Otherwise, if you're working on an implementation of this, we'd love to hear more about it, and we'd love to do some interact.
Thank you. I think similar question as the last one. Are there other folks who are implementing, have implemented, are able to interop? David's
From Google's, David Skenazy, Google. From our, we want to implement this. We just haven't had the time. So how about we try for the hackathon in Madrid? We'll trade you one of these for the Connect UDP. I feel I'm getting the wrong end of the deal on that one, but no, that way we can interop both at the hackathon in Madrid. That'll be great.
Awesome.
Thank you. That would be awesome. It sounds like for this one, there's a couple more issues we want to close before we head towards the last call, or?
I think we're getting pretty close. I need to take another peek at the issue tracker. I don't know if there's anything of, yeah, anyway, we'll take another look, but I think we're getting there.
That sounds good. Yeah, and we don't have to start that like immediately after this meeting or wait for Madrid. So a month from now, even if there's one or two last niggling things that we get sorted out, that is all good.
Sounds good.
We've got 2 people in the queue. Lucas.
Yeah, so I'm going to confess that I tuned out for the whole scrambling piece that took like a year or so. So I trust the technical design there. Like, because I saw lots of emails flying around, and it looked like there was good work being done. But I haven't read the document for a while, I would say. So I'm just like skimming through it as we speak, and there's like some little things around some of the headers and how they're defined, and what kind of just some obvious questions that are coming to mind. So I think I'll go and open some issues on that. I think they're probably trivial or editorial. And yeah, maybe if you're looking at cutting a draft, those are things we could, like, I'm happy to work with you, Eric, or the other authors to just maybe figure what the answer is ahead of whatever date you had in mind.
That'd be great. Thanks, Lucas.
Marcus.
Yeah, I just want to say that we have an implementation of Scramble. I haven't tested it with anyone yet, so I'd be happy to do, and maybe the next hackathon will be a great opportunity to do that.
Lovely, thank you. And Tommy, you are in the queue and not at the mic.
These are all true things. Tommy Polyapple. I was just getting up because I was looking at the issue list since that came up. We definitely have issues open. A lot of them do have some prior discussion. I think it's just a matter of like closing them out or figuring out if we want to adjust text. As far as I think the authors understand, there's not any like large design gaps left unless there's something that comes up from testing, etc. It's mainly about like massaging the explanations of things, making sure we're clear. So yeah, please, as you're reading through, Lucas and others, file more issues for things that are confusing, and we'll try to do a scrub and ask that people, if you have filed issues previously, and please respond when we say like, I think this can be closed, or like here's some editorial text to help clarify things.
And we're saying we think this is a good time for folks to do that. Like, we're not planning on doing an editorial cleanup pass or anything before. All right, sounds like now's the time. Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a good time to review. We've got a couple more issues before we start last call. If we can get things closed out before Madrid, we'll start a last call before Madrid happens. And then we'll look to hackathon at Madrid to make sure that we've established interop for this one. All right. The clicker of match. The clicker of match.
Let's get that down here. All right, back again for Connect Ethernet. Changes since 121 are basically the things we discussed in that meeting. They're very small, mostly like, yeah, we're going to drop frames if we can't deliver them, which was one of the things that we talked a lot about last meeting. And there were some performance considerations around congestion control, where basically we mustn't assume that there is congestion control, but if we know that there is, we can make some optimizations in an implementation. Still looking for more interop. We have more than 0, but barely. It's not a big lift if you have Connect IP already. And besides that, I don't have a lot more. Working group last call.
Sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
So not to repeat myself, but other implementations, folks who have interrupt successfully, anybody planning an implementation or about to do an implementation? I know we had some chit chat at the hackathon this time. Connect Ethernet.
Yeah, we did some interrupt last IETF. We're planning to this time, but some technical issues. Our GitLab server was down for 46 hours, just aligning with the hackathon. But yeah, be happy to do more interrupt. Last time we just sent some ARP requests through. We can probably do something more proper. And I don't know if we do that for Madrid hackathon or in between. I'll be happy to sync up with you and find a solution to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to spin up something to test between meetings.
Yeah, very nice. And thank you for coming to do that this time, even with server fun. Cool. Okay, so we've got a couple other implementation, singular there, and we've otherwise closed everything out. So I think this is similar to our first one of let's start a last call. All right, we will do that right after this meeting.
Howdy, chairs. I asked in the chat whether this had been sent to the IEEE IETF coordination list. It probably would be a good idea to do that before it goes out to IETF last call. So working group last call would be useful timing for it. Russ Housley is the chair of that and can help.
Yes, thank you very much, Ted. So yeah, we did chat about this a good while ago, and essentially where we landed was, hey, when you get to working group last call, call us back and we'll take a look at it. So this is, as part of that, our action list for starting last call on this document is both the folks in this room as well as with the IEEE folks. So that will be ahead of IETF last call, as you say. Craig, I see you are also in the queue.
Thank you. Craig Taylor, Apple. I will or do intend to raise an issue surrounding MTU, which we spoke about directly. I don't think it will be material with regards to group last call, but I did want to make you aware because you said everything was closed out. So,
thank you, appreciate that. Yep. And did we have a path forwards for those issues? Did we have a path forwards for those issues? As in, if Craig's about to file an issue for some fun, I think based on my understanding of your conversation, there was a solution in mind as well, right?
I think so, yes.
Perfect. So let's get some text based on that, and I think we're in good shape. Corey, I see you are also in the queue.
Corey with no hats, but been talking about Ethernet for a while here. We said also interior to get an early review. That might give a little bit more light on whether we've done enough for Ethernet.
Yes, very much. I think we've chatted about that a couple of times. We have a whole sticky note with a list of all the different people that we need to go poke. So if we forget any, please do help remind us. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, we have David, part 1. Yaroslav. I can update things. And then we'll put you up. Thank you. Beautiful.
Hello, everybody. It's DNS configuration for proxying IP in HTTP. I'm Yaroslav. I joined as co-author to this draft. So previously in DNS configuration over IP, this is not new way to transport DNS. This is, we have enough of those, and I'm sure we'll have more in the future. This is about signaling DNS configuration information, similarly how we can do in more traditional VPNs. The draft introduces two new types of capsules which are very similar to one another. There is request capsule and assign capsule. So idea is that client can request capsule from the server, or potentially server could request DNS configuration from the client. And then there are a bunch of things that we can, DNS configuration that we can include in the request, and similar setup that we have in the response. So potentially you can ask for a specific DNS server if you feel like it, and then in the response you have to contain at least one DNS server. So a few minor changes that we've done since the previous draft. This actually is applicable not only to remote access, but to site-to-site use cases. When you have two sites talking to each other, they have DNS relays, and potentially those DNS relays need to talk to each other and need to know what kind of domain names are available on the other side. So bidirectional exchange of DNS configuration is very valid for site-to-site or for extranet. We clarified that clear text DNS may travel over TCP and not just UDP. Common mistake to implement some interesting ACLs and then troubleshoot your DNS ad infinitum. Some terminology cleanup. Name server domain is now called authentication domain name. So basically that's a string that you include in SNI and in your host header if you're doing DNS over HTTPS. So one open question that we have, and maybe somebody in the room have an opinion on that. So at the moment, request and assign capsules are exactly the same, except they have different types. So request capsule includes a list of potentially empty, but could be non-empty, list of name servers that you'd like to have. Also, you could include domain names that you would like to resolve for, and also list of DNS technologies, ALPNs that you support, so get DNS servers for those. Frankly, I'm personally not sure if asking for specific DNS servers when you're making a request for DNS servers makes much sense. It's not really scarce resource, and it's not really bound to a client. And if you get a different DNS server, usually it's not the end of the world, and you can easily change your configuration. So maybe we could just limit it to list of ALPNs, sorry, not SVCBs, but ALPNs that clients support, and maybe list of internal domains that client is interested in, instead of asking for specific name servers. So if anybody have an opinion on that, please do join the queue and share this opinion with us. And then also open question if there are any other use cases or features that were missing in signaling DNS configuration. Right, now next steps is to do a little bit better documentation of site-to-site extranet, provide an example there. Right now we have an example only for remote access VPN. Again, site-to-site is perfectly viable use case for signaling DNS configuration. Yeah, we're planning on doing few implementations and testing interop between those implementations. Another open question to the audience, is there anyone else who is planning to do an implementation that is interested in interop? Oh, we have somebody in the queue, exciting.
It's me again. So I think, yeah, I'm also planning on implementing this, ideally by the next hackathon. If you go back one slide to that one, when I actually wrote the first draft of this, the idea was to mirror how address assign and request and assign work. So those for IP addresses have the same format one way or another. And for that particularly makes sense, because like in DHCP, if you've had an address and you disconnected, reconnected, it makes sense to have a hint of like, hey, if that one's still available, it would make my life easier to get it again. I just copy pasted that because I'm lazy. And Yaroslav pointed out that it doesn't necessarily make sense here. So I don't particularly feel strongly. It's true that I can't really think of a use case where you would be like, I want that DNS server over there. And I like your idea of potentially like listing the LPNs you have as a don't bother giving me stuff that I'm not going to use is perfectly reasonable. So I'm supportive of that change.
Thank you, David. Ben.
Hi. I don't see the value in DNS request. I would just eliminate it.
Oh, so,
and send
sorry,
DNS
you mean eliminate DNS request completely, or just name
Yes.
service inside DNS request?
I would eliminate the entire DNS request capsule, and just send DNS assign unconditionally. Or if you want, negotiate it as a, if you believe that it needs to be, if you want an expression of support, then you can negotiate that as a feature negotiation. But I'm not even sure you need that, because if the recipient doesn't support DNS assign, they can just ignore it.
Yeah, one of the values of DNS request is to signal DNS technologies that you support. So that's useful information.
So that, I mean, I understand in principle that this is a thing that you could do that would work, but it's not a thing that is done in any other DNS configuration system that I'm aware of. It's just not necessary. We don't, there's no great value in, for example, saving a certain amount of data in the DNS assign response by essentially providing a smaller DNS assign response. I'm not even sure it actually saves data on net, because you have to send more data in the DNS request capsule to get less data in the DNS assign response. And in practice, the DNS assign response is already very small. So, and the DNS request capsule is likely to indicate support for a range of things. So yeah, I just don't really get the value here. I think, I would model this on IPsec or DHCP or IPv6 RA, all of which send the DNS information unconditionally.
That's actually incorrect. IPv2, you do request it. I'm not saying that your previous points are wrong. Like, I think there's a reasonable question to be had, but there is prior art on this.
Okay.
It's not an uncommon way to do it.
Okay, that's fair. It doesn't have, it does have then so IPv2's version of this is parallel to an empty DNS request capsule.
That's just like the draft has right now.
Yeah,
it's kind of modeled on that, yeah.
And draft does not require DNS request in order to give you DNS assign. So if you don't want, you don't have to do DNS request, and you can do unsolicited DNS assign.
Because I think there is some value in sending the list of supported. You're absolutely right that if you just assign things that the other side won't support, it'll drop them. It's like the cost in bytes isn't very high. But if you're kind of making a count of how many clients are using how many DNS servers, making a load balancing decision, having a bit more information isn't crazy.
You get that information from the DNS servers. You'll see what's getting used.
Yeah, I think either system will work, to be honest.
I think I'm, no, Valerie.
Tommy?
Valerie,
no,
Valerie. You figured.
Hi.
Hi.
Valery Smyslov, LS Plus. That clarification about IQ2. In IQ2, a request is needed because the way IQ2 works, the responder doesn't send anything if it is not asked for.
Tommy Polly. What I believe, further clarification on IPv2, not only is that the case, but I think that the request is not always empty, and it can specify specific servers that it wants. So it can say, like, I think I want this DNS configuration, please update it if you know different.
Thank you. Anybody else have an opinion on this?
Is that your last slide as well?
All right. Thank you very much. And we will be updating this draft with additional examples and report on the interop at the next IETF. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we had one other mention of planned implementation. Are there any other folks who are interested, planning on implementing? I see a hand wave, 2 hand waves. Can I get a 3rd hand wave? No. Very nice. All right. So we'll write that down as 2 tentative interest in implementing. Awesome. And so, yeah, we've got a couple of, there's not actually any open issues right now. Do we need to file some to capture any of the discussion that we just had?
I think filing an issue questioning DNS requests and information that is in DNS request, it's a good call. And yeah, let's have discussion within that issue. I think we need more points of view there.
Ben, is that something that you could take an action to go file on the GitHub?
Yeah, absolutely.
I see Tommy's also in the queue.
Tommy Polly, I wanted to clarify my shrug. It's not a lack of enthusiasm. Rather, like in this case, I think this is something that we would implement after some other use cases of Connect IP are more mature and developed. So I would ask that if people have good interop cases they want to do for the types of Connect IP deployments that would use this, that would probably be a good first step. Because when we've done Connect IP testing before, a lot of that is some of the more degenerate cases where it's oh, I want to send a ping on this, but if it's a broader thing, that's where this is more interesting. I want to do more interop on that before I can do interop on this.
So for us, the key use case is site to site. So when somebody is connecting to somebody else with large sites, then that's where it's actually quite important. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, that brings us to the end of our adopted documents. And up next, we have David with the MASQUE proxy. Helping break down the stage already.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Skenazy, and I've been a MASQUE enthusiast for 6 years. This is the MASQUE proxy draft. A very brief history of MASQUE over the kind of past 6 years is that the initial proposal brought to dispatch was kind of its own protocol that did everything. You had proxying UDP, proxying QUIC, proxying IP, the kitchen sink worth of networking protocols. We then formed a working group and kind of split it off into a bunch of smaller pieces. So instead of one giant smorgasbord, they were small incremental changes to HTTP, which is a lot more manageable and easier to work with. We got a lot of enthusiasm over the years, such that we published a bunch of those as RFCs, which is great. They work well. They're integrated much better into HTTP semantics than the original protocol ever was. But they don't mention really MASQUE anymore in the title of the RFCs. And that by itself is not a problem at all. But a conversation that I've seen happen multiple times is someone working on a new service, a new application, realizes that they need something to help improve user privacy, like they're querying some data from a browser and need to make sure that who they're querying from doesn't get the user IP, for example. And they ask around and someone says, oh, you can use MASQUE for that. That works well. They Google it and then they land on that original proposal, which is completely unhelpful because that got subsumed. And confusion ensues, and then I get an email by a very confused person, and we have a very productive conversation. And this happened enough times that I said, oh, I should potentially write this down. So that's what this draft is. It answers the question, what does just use MASQUE mean? And the idea is if, like now when someone was saying, you could say, oh, go to that document, it explains what MASQUE is and how you can use it. Through some data tracker replaces tags, now I think it's the one that shows up when you use your favorite search engine to look up MASQUE. So what's in this draft? It explains kind of in the introduction how we got here, briefly, kind of what I just said. And then it goes over the privacy properties that you get from MASQUE. And so like you get privacy from websites. They don't get the client IP address. You get privacy from network providers that don't see which websites you're visiting. So it talks a little bit about partitioning, which it references an IB document that's pretty good, but explains how that applies to MASQUE, where you can run 2 tunneled MASQUE proxies like iCloud Private Relay or Google IP Protection in order to get even better privacy properties. And it discusses obfuscation, where if you combine like the existing MASQUE methods with private or with HTTP concealed authentication, which has also been published as RFC, you get some really good privacy properties for your MASQUE's proxy, which is that clients that don't have the key can't even find out that you offer MASQUE. And then it also talks about what MASQUE is not, comparing it to HTTP, to DO, because a question that ended up coming up quite a bit in those conversations was, wait, we have MASQUE, we have OHTTP, and especially if you do 2 hops in MASQUE, your architecture looks a lot like OHTTP gateway relay. Which one do you, when do you use one, when do you use the other? So that's kind of explained in there as well. And I hadn't initially planned on having this published, but someone pointed out that an RFCS in auth 48 that's almost done, which is the MLS architecture document, has the text here, which is, oh yeah, privacy be good, use MASQUE. And someone was like, wait, are you gonna publish this? Like, it's a little silly to keep referencing a draft. And I hadn't actually, I thought of it more as a pointer to give people, and probably I should have predicted that they would have then started referencing it. But that's why I brought it kind of to the list. Maybe it makes sense to publish this, because then we have a stable reference. It can give some guidance. Like this would not have any like specifying anything. It would be either informational. It would definitely be informational. So what do we do with this? We don't say what MT told me to do with the first MASQUE draft 6 years ago. Yes, inside joke for whoever was in the room. And if we think it makes sense to publish this, is the MASQUE working group the right place? Because like, in a way, it's the same name on the draft and on the working group, so it seems fair. But in terms of charter, it's a little ambiguous. It doesn't, like, the charter was really about the protocols that we would build more than the informational documents. So that's kind of the idea. We've had some conversations on the list. Someone pointed out, or multiple people pointed out, that I had a section about the properties that was overstating what we could do. Well, or more importantly, that traffic analysis has improved since this was first written. And so it kind of really goes into the detail of, yeah, traffic analysis can defeat some of these protections. It still makes the attack more expensive, and there are other ways to prevent that with padding, but like it goes into a more detailed analysis. And Antoine had some good questions on the list that I agree with, so we're gonna file issues about those to improve it. But so we can all go into those details, but kind of my main top level question is, do you think we should do this, and should it be here? All right, let's open the mic line. Antoine.
So, hello, Antoine, privacy enthusiast. I guess we all are enthusiasts here. I had a remark regarding the venue to publish it as an informational RFC. There is a privacy-oriented research group, PRG, and I think that if we can't accommodate the document in QUIC for chartering reasons, then I'm pretty sure that PRG will be very happy to be a venue for this document to be published.
Thanks, that's a good suggestion, actually. It would fit there. And by the way, this isn't QUIC, this is MASQUE. But yes, your point still stands. Same enthusiasm, different hats. Yaroslav.
Yeah, I think since there is quite a bit of rich history behind MASQUE, there is quite a bit of confusion. What does it actually mean to whom? From both kind of positioning side, like why MASQUE, but also from the pure technology side. So if I speak to another vendor and that vendor says, hey, we support MASQUE, and I support MASQUE, does it mean that it will interoperate? Well, maybe they do connect IP over HTTP1 and I do connect TCP UDP over HTTP3, and surprise, surprise, they won't speak to each other. And another dimension here is there are certainly privacy use cases for MASQUE, but then there are enterprise VPN-ish use cases like remote access, site-to-site, ZTNA, what have you. So perhaps we should split this in few swim lanes. So one would be like privacy properties of MASQUE and what does it do for private relays and other value propositions. But secondly, maybe more technical ones is what does MASQUE actually mean, and clarify that MASQUE, though it has Q in its abbreviation, it's actually not only about QUIC. There are other ways to deal with MASQUE and how to correctly make a statement about we support MASQUE or we don't support MASQUE.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely something worth thinking through. I think to me, the focus that I really want to have is kind of the privacy use case, because that's the one that I've seen kind of over and over again. I think the other ones are reasonable though, but I'm not entirely sure how to separate them. But I think we can do something there. Tommy.
As Tommy heads to the mic, I'll also note that we do have a note about kind of non-QUIC transports in the charter that we added to cover being able to document that kind of story to help make it clear to people.
Tommy Polly, Apple. So one nit, you mentioned how we talk about the partitioning IAB document. So thank you for referencing that. I think that's important. And that's the broader picture here. It's currently listed as like one of the properties, which is interesting, like alongside hiding from networks, hiding from websites. I think it is the parent principle of those things. Like separating your information from a website or a network is partitioning. So I think we can talk about how we phrase that. Not a big deal.
That's a good point. I think splitting that to its own section makes sense. Yeah.
Or just have it like in the intro to the section about what are the properties you get, and like you achieve these properties through partitioning, but the properties you want are hiding from networks, hiding from websites, etc.
Sure. Yeah, but I think there are two parts. One is the partitioning, but like what that subsection is about now, which we can kind of revisit, is the idea of chaining two MASQUE proxies or more. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important one that I want to discuss. But you're right that could be under a different header than partitioning.
And the partitioning document talks about two-hop MASQUE already. So I think it would be interesting to see, like, are we actually going to be able to define what a MASQUE proxy is versus talk about like the category of what it means to use MASQUE? Right now, it feels like we're defining like the MASQUE proxy, but I don't think it's one thing necessarily. When I speak normally, when we talk about different deployments, I have to distinguish between two-hop MASQUE, one-hop MASQUE, OHTTP. So maybe kind of giving this zoo of different options would be good. And then saying like, okay, like at least for me, when I say two-hop MASQUE, I mean you are chaining two proxies. You're probably talking to them over H3 or H2. They support connect and connect UDP, and they have some sort of private authentication. And like there's one hot mask, which is like the one hot version of that. So I think there are different, like defining different ways to think about it would be good, as opposed to saying like there's just one. And then actually to the point Antoine made, like pair G actually could make a lot of sense, because to some degree, once you're going into like talking about the privacy properties, it's a bit more researchy than engineering.
Yeah, fair. Our responsible area director.
Yes. So as you note, this is not explicitly in charter. The charter does say that we can talk about considerations with respect to various things. So if we wanted to squint and maybe slide it through that way, maybe. But that, when we start getting into making claims about the properties, that's when it starts feeling like, okay, that maybe doesn't belong in this group. This group is the engineering. That said, I really do want this document to exist, and this is why. Whenever somebody comes to the IETF with a monolithic, how do I bring this giant application and standardize it? This is my poster child. Because David came here with this vision of a scenario, and over the course of the past 6 years, it's been broken down into discrete components, each of which makes sense and is useful, so that now we can stand here and say that vision and scenario does exist and the IETF did that. And it's easier to tell that story if I can point to here's the vision, here's the output. And so I would love to have that document and be able to link to it, not only from the what does it mean to use MASQUE, but how do you go from vision to protocol specifications of the IETF. So please do this work. Please do this work. Maybe not here.
Thank you. That's really cool. Lucas.
Hello. So on the mailing list, I've said I support this. I think there's a great opportunity. I, like David, has worked on MASQUE and had to explain over and over again to people what it means. What are we doing? And that started off easy because I was working on a specific deployment, and it's continued to expand in various and different ways. We put a couple of blog posts out as part of a way to communicate internally, and other people have read them. I posted a link into the chat just this week. There was a thing on Hacker News. Basically, a university student had gone and was trying to reverse engineer Cloudflare's VPN client software that had moved from WireGuard to MASQUE. We'd announced that we'd done that, and they were confused by what it meant, and they'd have to like reverse engineer it and get out all sorts of stuff. And even then, we weren't doing Connect IP as it's defined by the IETF. We do a kind of slightly vendor specific thing, which is arguably we shouldn't, but we do. But like the principles of the MASQUE proxying, whereby we use HTTP and we do these things, do apply. It's just some of the specific details don't. And I think it's all of this nuance that's very hard to articulate. Now, just looking at the charter, the last item on that charter, like the very last statement, is MASQUE is not intended to be a long-lived working group. So assuming that we're going to finish the work that we're doing, and maybe it'll be recharted, I don't know, I don't want to look too far ahead, but it would be nice to have a document that explains what we did, but also how you could continue the work of MASQUE-like things. If you want to bring protocol foo over HTTP, what would you do? This document could provide some framework for good ways and design principles. I'm not saying it has to, but maybe elements of BCP in there as well, so that if there's working groups wound up and someone needs to define a new protocol thing, maybe they need some capsules, whatever, they would probably go to the HTTP working group to do this. But that all of the stuff that we know today as the MASQUE working group is codified somewhere before we forget. Anyway, thanks. I'm supportive of this work. I would like to see it adopted, and I'll contribute reviews and text and stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas.
To chime in a teensy bit there, one of the things that we did early on in this working group was produce a requirements document, which we then parked. So I think we have plenty of precedent for kind of looking at what is the shape of the thing that we are building. Looking at it in hindsight makes it a lot easier to figure out that shape.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that one. We didn't publish it though.
During the discussion, a point Yaroslav made and one of your answers made me think about a comment I have on the document. Is it's very good at stating what MASQUE is able to provide as properties, but it's in counterpoint, it shows what MASQUE is not able yet to provide. And in particular, I really like the aspect of proxy chaining beyond two proxies. And I think that it may hint about topics that privacy enthusiasts are very interested in, and that may be a future technical item to work on in the group if people are interested in this.
Thanks. Christian.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing that Antoine was saying. Is that there is this elephant in the room, which is, if we had to redo Tor, will we do it with MASQUE? And we are, the reason I think that particular theoretical question is interesting is that there are a bunch of security issues that go with something like that. And those security issues tend to dig into, I mean, properties of HTTP3, property of QUIC, what is the encryption we do, what's it, like, for example, one of the difference between Tor and chaining multiple masks is that in Tor, the client doesn't know who the intermediaries are, which is kind of hard to do. I mean, there are things like that, and it's an interesting case study. I don't know whether we can hijack David's document to do that, but that's something we should probably do anyhow.
So that's a very interesting question. And so I've thought about it a little bit, and some smarter people have even thought about it more, where what we deployed with the multiple hops is nested, whereas in something like Tor, you want kind of more circuits with some point-to-point, which allows you to get these properties where the client is less in control of the path and provides you some resilience from, there are some attacks on MASQUE that allow you to see the shape of the path by observing the network at multiple points, because that was not one of the design requirements for MASQUE, but is absolutely a design requirement for Tor. So that's going to be an interesting case study for sure. Question of how long it'll take to figure it out is an open one.
Well, I mean, if there are volunteers, we could get together.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with you on that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We would have to get the Tor people involved because they know a lot
At
of this
some
stuff
point,
much
yes.
better.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, no, that would be interesting. Ben.
Hi. So I think there's a lot of value in a starting point document for people coming into this territory and trying to figure out what technology they need and what even are all the different technologies that exist here and how do they connect to each other. I think that's very valuable. I think the history the idea of like a history document, how did this protocol form that Mike was talking about, I think that's much more difficult. The saying is success has 1,000 fathers. I think there are a lot of people who would want a piece of credit for this, and I think that is better kept out of the RFC series. I think there's a parallel here to WebRTC, where the WebRTC work, RTC Web and WebRTC and W3C took a bunch of some new, some existing technologies, produced a whole fleet of RFCs, And ultimately, these ended up being well known publicly under the brand WebRTC, even in cases where the web wasn't involved. And you know, I think something has gone wrong if HTTP Connect from 1996 is considered MASQUE. Like, this is factually wrong, but also I understand that branding and public perception work in strange ways. And, you know, SCTP is, you know, DTLS and SCTP are part of WebRTC in a way. SIP is probably better known through WebRTC than as SIP per se. My personal preference here would be that we let MASQUE go and say, look, this is MASQUE is the name of the working group. It is not a technology. It is not a corporation. Yeah, we made a pretty logo, but MASQUE is going to be finished, and it was a process. And what it did was that it defined a number of HTTP extensions and related technologies that, along with a bunch of other stuff, provide a lot of useful capabilities related to proxying. If you want to do HTTP proxying, let's provide a really good guide about what those technologies are altogether and how to choose it between them.
Thanks. I think that's interesting. Unfortunately, or fortunately, like the MASQUE brand became something, and I really don't want to throw that away. I think, obviously I'm biased, but like you have comparisons out there of MASQUE versus WireGuard versus like V2 IPsec that are very useful comparisons, because in some cases you want one, in some cases you want the other. And just having a name that say, well, you can do the thing, it's connected to AP, but, or this is way less compelling. And I think because we managed to kind of break through with that name, it would be a shame to throw it away.
Martin Duke, Google. On terms of venue, like what I think is important is that we have an RFC. Like everyone seems to want to have a pointer to reference, and that the right people get eyes on it / write it, which obviously includes you and a couple other people in here. I don't think it really matters if it's done here. I mean, it's convenient because it's the right people. We don't even have to like meet at every IETF to have it, keep it open for this one document, or we could do it in TSVWG as, I don't know, you know, I'll say that as TSVWG chair. I think we could take something like this. If no one else wanted it, we could AD sponsor it. You could do it in the IRTF. You could do it in ISE. Like there's no reason this needs to be a consensus document even. Like just whoever's willing to take it, go there, or just do it in the ISE.
Thank you. That's definitely a potential venue, and yeah.
All right, up next. Not what I got in line for, but to Ben's point, I think I agree with David that like, you know, people do talk about MASQUE outside of IETF, and it's confusing at times, but it'd be good.
There's a world outside the IETF?
Yeah, you're gonna have to go there next week.
Oh no.
For the venue bit, obviously, yeah, just do it wherever it makes sense. I don't love the ISE option because I think there are opinions, and like this is a collaborative effort. It's been collaborative for a long time. It has succeeded because it's collaborative, and we have venues where we don't need like IETF wide protocol level consensus that we can still publish something that has collaboration.
And just to respond to that, I agree. I think I was keeping the ISE in mind. If everyone here was like, shrug, we don't care, do it or don't, we don't care. But like that wasn't the answer I'm hearing.
Yeah. And then the reason I got up was when, you know, Christian was suggesting talking about how you replace Tor. That's like super interesting. I don't know if it belongs in this, but I could kind of see like doing two documents at the same time when there's like, here's what MASQUE is, and then here's what MASQUE could be or how it can be used. And that's very interesting. It's very researchy. If you do that, that's definitely PARG. I do think that this main document could also be PARG. I think that's very appropriate. So since I see a version of the future where a lot of people from this working group are going to like descend upon Perigee, this may be something that we want to like discuss with those research group chairs of like, would they be interested in having those discussions there and publishing things around this there or not? And then we can decide from the venue about that later.
For sure, because especially the way the IETF works is quite different from the IETF, and it is much more up to the chairs to adopt as opposed to IETF where consensus call or adoption is based on consensus. So I totally agree with you. I think because of what I'm hearing, one of the next steps I had in mind was chat with the chairs here, the AD here, the PERG chairs, and the IETF chair. See how everyone feels about this, and then kind of go from there. Brian. Oh no, Martin again? Oh no, Brian.
I think that's stale. I concur with sort of like what everyone said. This document should exist. Whether it's one or two documents, there's a thing that Dennis put in the chat. Maybe have a look at that and meditate on it. While I was lurking on this conversation, though, like a really dumb idea came to my mind. I actually realized that MASQUE kind of answers some of the questions that we pose in Panarchy, right? And that it actually gives endpoint control over some of the ways that things are routed without having to go all the way down to like SRv6, without like, it does that in user space in a way that's like very interesting, right? So I don't think that you should publish this document in Panarchy, although we would be happy to have you come over and ask us about that. I think that what I would ask is for like one of the outcomes of that document is to be a retrospective of MASQUE in Panarchy, because I think that the people who are not here, who are there, might want to see this as an alternate way to do that.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. I think that's a cool idea.
I had a mind blown moment about like when Christian talked about the Tor thing. I was like, oh wait a minute, could you actually build a path-aware network out of MASQUE tunnels? And yeah, you absolutely could. At this point, it's not where we started, but yeah, we should talk.
It's a little terrifying in some ways, but like at least thinking through it in those words, in those terms, is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll noodle on that. That's an interesting idea. Thanks.
Clicking buttons to actually drain the queue. There we go. So I think we've gotten a good chunk of interest from folks in this room. And I think we've identified a couple of other venues that we think will be interested. And so I think one of the questions we get to answer is whether we think one of those venues should own this document and be responsible for driving it forwards, or if this is a place where we'd say like, hey, Perigee, like, come chat about this, let's talk about it. We have a substantial amount of precedent for talking about applicability documents. And to Mike's comment about we've designed a bunch of really nice building blocks, one of the things that we need to explain to people is, okay, great, here are these building blocks. These are the different ways that you can arrange them in the properties that you get when you do. And that's essentially one-to-one with this document, in my understanding. So we have a couple of different paths forwards. We've been having a discussion in the chat and elsewhere about kind of how many documents is this? Is this a grab all of the different use cases that we think MASQUE could ever be used for and put them in one document? Is this a, here are the properties that you get when you do different things with MASQUE, and there are future research things that you could do. There's another piece of this, which is what happens in the future when you want to extend MASQUE. Where do you go? What do you do? We've talked about kind of long-term homes for maintenance of some of the different things that we've been doing in this working group. To Ben's comment, and I see he's back in the queue, we did talk about this a lot when Connect TCP came up, and whether that should live in MASQUE or that should live in HTTP BIS. And it's not unreasonable to read our charter as including that, but we ended up choosing to land that in HTTP BIS as a longer-term maintenance place for it anyway. So we have a lot of different options here. I think one of the big questions is is this something that this working group wants to spend time on? We can all go descend on some other group and do it in a different room with many of these people plus some of our closest friends, or we can also invite those closest friends to come here and talk to us. We'll definitely be having a close reading of the charter conversation with our ADs and such around what we would need to do there. But one way to frame this is essentially the applicability document for MASQUE, where we talk about these are the ways you can arrange those building blocks and what you get when you do. This is, if you have to solve this problem, this is one way to do so. It's not saying this is the only way to do so, but this is one way to do so. So if folks have thoughts on that, now would be a wonderful time to hop in the queue. And I see Ben is also already in the queue.
Thanks. Just on the note of whether we want to do it here, I would maybe like to punt that until we've had a conversation with the PRG chairs, just because if we decide, oh, we should do it over there, and they're like, nah, I'd rather like get a vibe check, you know?
Yeah, I think we'll coordinate amongst the chairs to figure out kind of how do we decide where things go. But I think it's very clear from this discussion, and I suspect it will be from that discussion, that the union of the set of people who are interested will want to talk.
Absolutely.
Ben?
So somebody just mentioned that, you know, the recurring concept of like a WireGuard versus MASQUE comparison as evidence that MASQUE is a thing and not just a process, or that we should start using the word MASQUE, or be willing to use the word MASQUE to describe a thing and not just a process. When I compare that to WebRTC or to WireGuard, the problem I have with this essentially is that MASQUE isn't a thing. There is no thing that I can point to and say, this is MASQUE. There is no standard that I can say, if you both implement MASQUE, then you will be able to talk to each other, because there is no interoperable overarching technical element. I think we should define one. I want there to be an overarching interoperable technical element. I want to be able to say, if party A implements MASQUE and party B implements MASQUE, then they will be able to talk to each other. Here's the bootstrap information, like in a fully standardized format that is required for those two parties to interoperate. So I'd say if there's really appetite for running to that conclusion about what MASQUE is, then we have a little more work to do. And I think we should do that work.
So I definitely don't want to boil the ocean with this draft. I think like there's a lot to be done there, and that work should happen. There's cool work in Interia about bootstrapping proxy configs, for example, that is super helpful. But yes, MASQUE does exist. At the end of the day, if you look at WebRTC is also a collection of specs. There's the WebRTC JavaScript API with then the list of specs that web browsers do, but that doesn't work by itself. You also need to implement stun servers and yada, yada, yada. So I think as much as grand unified theory of MASQUE sounds cool, and I definitely won't get in the way of that, I don't want to put that here. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes. I see some value of like MASQUE as defined as like umbrella protocol, and it's okay. This is called MASQUE, and when you do all these kind of things, you can select we are doing MASQUE, and that could perhaps also satisfy Ben saying like, hey, MASQUE doesn't mean only proxy UDP or like Ethernet or something more. We can bring technology, but I would like to have this document really very bit focused on like what the production of this working group if we are doing it here. But the reason I came up is actually given another option. As I'm saying, like you have RG and working groups, this working group, outside this working group has interest on this kind of topic. What another option could be like, if it doesn't fit to the MASQUE charter, because Mike will decide on that one, right? But Mike can also decide like ADO sponsor this one and host, have this working group as a discussing venue. Then you don't need to change your charter. You can do that. It's ADO sponsor. AD can bring in people, and what Eric was saying, bring all your friends here to discuss things here. So that's an option, because all the AD needs basically a venue feedbacks on the area sponsored document. And this is a perfect venue for that one.
Thanks. Yeah, and I see Mike slightly nodding. Is that fair? Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. All right, we have plenty of good options. Mike, I'll chat with Mike about that one. Lucas again?
Yeah, I was saying in the chat, but just to put on the mic, like I have practical conflicts with PowerG like every time. Like the last 3 IETFs, it's conflicted with TSVWG. We have a room, like this is an engineering working group. We have people who built and deployed these things and are building extra stuff. Yes, there's a lot of privacy things that are amazing, and getting input into text on that is great. But to me, that research group doesn't seem the right place to kind of articulate engineering architectures that we have done and will continue to do and evolve and maintain. So I could live with it anywhere, sure, but it would be a real shame. Like, unfortunately for me, research groups always have to take lower priority than my working groups. So, and I don't think that's something we can even solve with a market as a conflict, because there's only finite time.
Yeah, fair enough. I have had the same problem. Thanks, Lucas. That makes sense. Yaroslav?
Yaroslav, MASQUE evangelization enthusiast. There is an awful lot of combination of things that fall into MASQUE, right? We have TCP, UDP, templated TCP, IP, Ethernet over HTTP 1, 2, and 3. I'm sure there are some others that I'm missing. So, and they have drastically different properties, and you can have a really good time if you implement a decent TCP proxy and tunnel things in quick streams according to connect TCP, which I'm not sure if it's classified MASQUE or not, but that works well. And you can have really bad time, for example, if you take TCP, multiple TCP streams, encapsulate it into connect IP and send it over HTTP 1. And any packet loss or jitter will create TCP and TCP problem. I think at some point we need to be opinionated what good looks like and encourage implementers to take good choices. Otherwise, I've implemented MASQUE and it sucks because you picked the maybe easy or wrong or whatever option. Yeah, I've seen that many times, sadly.
No, that's fair. If you do connect IP over HTTP2 and do TCP over that, you're going to have a bad day. And I don't know how much, because like that, then we get into kind of BCP territory, and that's a lot trickier. So I definitely want to think about it and give it some amount of guidance, but that could become very, very large as well.
Hi, Alestra. You invoked the name of WebRTC, so I had to pop up. And one nice thing about the WebRTC effort was that we had an overview document. It was written first and published last, and it's informational. But I think that writing down what the current plan is a really good idea, and we should just get it out. The important thing is the writing and getting the content right, and then they can figure out who pushes the approval button eventually. The AD can take care of that.
Yeah, awesome, thanks.
Lots of good discussion. Your last moment to go interact with Meet Echo. So I thought we'd do a poll, and we were chatting as chairs in a back channel here. We are explicitly not asking about whether or not you're interested in spending this working group's time discussing this, but this is more of a who's interested in talking about this topic in general. So please chime in with yes if this is a thing that you'd be interested in talking about. If you need to follow it to some other room, you're going to be following the IETF to a whole different continent soon anyway, so hopefully that's not too big a deal. So I think we have an action item to chat with both some other chairs and our AD and figure out kind of how we want to handle the charter situation. I think we've done a pretty good job enumerating almost all of the options in the last little bit, so I'm not going to recap them all right now. But based on these poll results, it looks like there's pretty substantial interest in talking about this kind of thing. And I think one of the places where it's very easy to get distracted is we build all kinds of cool engineering solutions for things, and helping people actually use them to build something that is meaningful for a human is also an essential place to spend our time and energy. So with that, we will close the poll down a little bit. Thank you, David, for the nice slides. It's less AI generated than usual.
Yeah, it's been a busy week.
And thank you all for the excellent discussion on this. It's very clear that there's interest in helping make the work that we're doing here more accessible to people. So we'll take some action to go and figure out the right process way to do that. But thank you all for the energy in making that happen, especially over the last 6 years as we've built a whole bunch of stuff.
Thanks everyone for your time.
All right, with that, IETF 122 has concluded. Thank you all. Thank you also to Nidhi for volunteering to take notes for this session, especially that mic line at the end.
Thank you, Eric. I think I was the one that hired you to kick this working group off, and you've done an amazing job, and this has been incredibly successful, and thank you for your huge role in that happening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric, from my side also.
Going to say thank you both, and it has been a pleasure working with all of you. I'll still be in those seats.